On the night of February 12, 1771, the King of Sweden, Adolf Frederick, sat down to dinner. It was the end of winter. The icy wind blew in from the Baltic, and the palace was warmed by great hearths and by the sound of silver cutlery. The king looked content. The table was laden: meats, wines, seafood, and his favorite dessert, a sweet called hetweg, made with hot milk, sweet bread, and almonds. But no one imagined that this dinner would be his last. Hours later, the king would be dead, and his death would go down in history, not for wars, intrigues, or betrayals, but for overeating. Adolf Frederick was not a king of great deeds. He was neither a conqueror nor a tyrant. In fact, he was a man of calm temperament, almost shy. He rose to the throne in 1751, more by political convenience than by personal merit. During his reign, Sweden lived through a curious period. Royal power was limited by a strong parliament, controlled by factions known as the Hats and the Caps. There was little the king could do. He signed decrees, made public appearances, but had very little real influence. His reign was called the Age of Liberty, but for Adolf Frederick, it was an age of humiliation. He was a king in name only, a monarch who did not rule. Behind the crown was a melancholy man. Adolf Frederick liked woodworking, designing clocks, and above all, eating. Food was his refuge, his small personal empire. While the government was split by political quarrels, the king withdrew into palace dinners and banquets. He was known for having an insatiable appetite. Servants would whisper that he ate like a starving soldier and drank like a sailor on a spree. But no one dared call him a glutton. After all, he was the king. As the years passed, Adolf's body began to give way. He put on weight, suffered from slow digestion, stomach pains, and constant bloating. But he never stopped eating what he loved, and in the winter of 1771, he decided to treat himself to a banquet, a final gesture of pleasure in a reign of frustrations. The meal began early that evening. The king was in good spirits. On the table there were lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, smoked herring, and veal, a heavy mix, but typical of Nordic cuisine. The king ate everything without haste. With each course, he asked for more wine. The servants attended him in silence, used to the routine. But what came next would be remembered for centuries. Dessert, hetweg, was the pride of the Swedish court. A sweet bun filled with almond paste, served with hot milk and cream. The king adored that sweet. That night he ate not one, not two servings, he ate 14. The servants fell silent. No one dared interrupt him. When he finished, Adolf Frederick leaned back in his chair, exhausted. Minutes later, he began to sweat and complain of severe abdominal pain. The court physicians were summoned in haste, but there was nothing they could do. The king alternated between groans of pain and violent nausea. His breathing grew shallow, his face flushed. For hours, he struggled against his own body, and toward the early hours, the man who ruled Sweden died of indigestion. The next morning, the palace was in shock. Servants whispered in the corridors while the ministers tried to decide what to tell the public. How do you announce the death of a king who died from eating too much? It was shameful, but impossible to hide. The official cause released was acute digestive problems. But everyone knew the truth. The king had literally killed himself at the table. Foreign newspapers scoffed. In France, they said the Swedish king died as he lived, full of things he couldn't digest. In England, an anonymous poet wrote, "Here lies Adolf, king and glutton, dead not by war, but by a meal." After his death, Sweden plunged into uncertainty. His son, Gustav III, ascended the throne, and it would be he who restored the absolute power of the monarchy, reversing everything his father had never managed to do. Many historians believe that Adolf Frederick's weakness and grotesque death were the spark for his son's coup d'état years later. The image of the father, a gentle man, yet submissive and obsessed with food, became the example of what a king could not be. Thus, the man who lived a forgotten life ended up with a death impossible to forget. Today, Adolf Frederick's portrait still hangs in Stockholm's royal palace. Looking at it is almost a paradox. His face is serene, his gaze gentle, like that of a man who would never have imagined entering history for something so banal. But behind the portrait lies the truth. A king who spent his life swallowing political humiliations and died swallowing the only pleasure he had left. Adolf's body was buried with full honors in a quiet, restrained funeral. But ironically, his name was recorded not among the great warriors or rulers of Europe, but among the most curious and grotesque deaths ever recorded. More than 2 centuries have passed, and the story is still told of the king who ate himself to death. There was no conspiracy, poison, or treachery. No enemy killed him. No coup overthrew him. What destroyed him was his own weakness, the same appetite that once comforted him. Adolf Frederick, the King of Sweden, died surrounded by luxury, served with everything he wanted, and in the end, the banquet that comforted him became his last enemy.